The most surprising thing you've ever heard. It starts with a man they called crazy and a love story that no one saw coming. Ethan Clark adjusted his tie as he stepped into the crowded downtown cafe, the smell of roasted coffee beans wafting through the air. The soft hum of conversation filled the space, but he barely noticed it. His eyes were searching for one person. Amara James was already there, seated by the window, her wheelchair positioned neatly beside the small table. The sunlight streamed through the glass, catching the golden undertones of her dark skin and the slight shimmer in her braided hair. She smiled when she saw him, a warm, genuine smile that always seemed to reach her deep brown eyes. "You're late," she teased as he approached, her voice light but carrying the strength of someone who had faced far more than tardy coffee dates in life. "Traffic," Ethan replied with a sheepish grin, sitting down across from her. "But I'm here now." Their connection had begun 6 months earlier, an accidental meeting at a local art gallery. Ethan, a successful architect in his early 30s, had been admiring a piece of modern art when Amara rolled up beside him and offered her interpretation. Her insight had been bold, refreshing, and completely different from his own. That conversation had spiraled into hours of shared thoughts and laughter, and by the end of the evening, Ethan knew he wanted to see her again. What Ethan didn't anticipate was the whirlwind that would follow. "You know," Amara began, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, "I still think you're a little crazy for putting up with all this." Ethan leaned forward, his blue eyes locking with hers. "And you know I think it's worth it. Every bit of it." What all this referred to was no small thing. Ethan's family, friends, and even his colleagues had been vocal about their disapproval of his relationship with Amara. Not because of who she was as a person, but because of who she wasn't. In their eyes, Amara's wheelchair and her status as a black woman made her an unsuitable match for someone like Ethan, a successful, handsome white man from a privileged background. "They'll never accept her," his father had said bluntly during a family dinner. "You could have anyone, Ethan," a friend had whispered at a party. "Why her?" The weight of societal expectations pressed down on both of them, but Ethan refused to give in. Amara, however, wasn't so sure. "You deserve someone who makes your life easier, not harder," she said one evening, after another confrontation with strangers in a restaurant. "I don't want to be the reason people look at you differently." Ethan's jaw had tightened as he reached for her hand. "Amara, I don't care what they think. You're the only one who matters." Even now, as they sat in the cafe, the judgment of the world felt like a tangible presence. A couple at a nearby table glanced their way, whispering to each other. Amara noticed, her fingers tensing slightly around her coffee mug. "Let them stare," Ethan said softly, following her gaze. "They don't know what they're missing." A small laugh escaped her lips. "You always know what to say, don't you?" "Not always. But I know what I feel." Outside, the city buzzed with life. Inside the cafe, Ethan and Amara's world felt like its own bubble, a fragile one, but fiercely protected by the love they were building. "Where are you watching from?" Ethan would later ask an audience he could only imagine. "Have you ever witnessed such a scene? If it were you, what would you do?" Please publicly comment your opinion. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to see more tomorrow. For now, their story was just beginning. The words of others are often heavier than the weight of our own hearts. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting the quiet moment between them. He glanced at the screen, his face momentarily clouding over as he read the message. It was from his mother. "Ethan, we need to talk." "About Amara." He tucked the phone back into his coat pocket with a sigh, his mind racing. His mother had always been a force to be reckoned with, charming, graceful, but steadfast in her beliefs. She came from a world where proper relationships followed tradition, where status, race, and family history were everything. Ethan knew what this message meant. "Ignore it," Amara said, sensing the shift in his mood. She had been through this herself, countless times. The conversations with family members who didn't understand, the stares, the whispered judgments. Her family was supportive, but they, too, had been cautious about her relationship with Ethan. "I can't," Ethan said quietly, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple. She won't let it go." Amara looked down at her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. There were moments when the weight of everything felt unbearable. Ethan's mother had called her a distraction when they first met. His friends had hinted that Amara was only after his money, or worse, that she was a social experiment for his guilt-ridden soul. "Ethan, we both know how this is going to end," Amara said, her voice soft but firm. "They'll never accept me." He shook his head vehemently. "That's not true. I won't let them break us apart." Amara met his eyes, her expression unreadable. "It's not just them. It's everyone. You're so wrapped up in fighting for us that you're ignoring how hard this is for me. I'm the one they see as less than. I'm the one who's made to feel like an outsider in your world. And sometimes it's just too much." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Amara, you're not an outsider. You're my partner. Don't let their words, their hate, make you think anything else." But Amara could feel the cracks forming in her own heart, her self-doubt creeping in like an unwelcome shadow. She had grown up in a world where people stared at her for reasons beyond her control. Now, with Ethan, it was even harder to face the idea that she was a constant challenge to his life. "I love you, Ethan," she said after a long silence. "But I don't know how long I can do this. I don't know how much more rejection I can take." Ethan's face softened. "We'll figure it out together. I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." But Amara's doubts remained, like an invisible wall between them. How long could they endure the stares, the whispers, the criticisms? How long before it all became too much to bear? Later that day, after they parted ways, Ethan sat in his car, staring at his phone again. His mother's message was still there, staring back at him. He had to reply, but part of him was terrified of what that conversation would bring. His fingers hovered over the screen. "Mom, I love you, but I'm not changing my mind about Amara. She's the one for me. You'll see." He hit send. For a moment, he felt relieved. But only for a moment. The storm was coming, and he didn't know how much longer he could protect them both from it. At that moment, Amara was at home, alone in her apartment, staring out the window. She had been thinking about her own future. She loved Ethan, more than she ever thought possible, but sometimes she wondered if she was holding him back. Could she really make him happy, knowing how much of a struggle it was to be with her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing on the table. It was a text from her best friend, Nadia. "Are you okay? I know things are tough right now, but don't forget, you're more than enough. You deserve to be loved." Amara smiled softly at the message, her heart aching with both gratitude and fear. She wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that Ethan's love was enough to overcome all the obstacles they faced. But doubts crept in, just like always. "Maybe they're right," she whispered to herself. "Maybe I'm just not good enough for him." But deep down, she knew she couldn't give up on the only person who had ever truly believed in her. The only person who saw her as she was, without the filter of prejudice, without the weight of expectations. She texted Nadia back, "I'm trying. I really am." The road ahead would not be easy. But Amara wasn't sure she was ready to let go of the one thing that had ever made her feel truly alive. True love is not about perfection. It's about embracing each other's flaws. The days that followed were filled with tension, each moment a reminder of the pressure they were under. Ethan and Amara saw each other less, their time together now colored by the subtle disapproval of Ethan's family and friends, and the constant weight of societal judgment. Ethan, usually so confident in everything he did, found himself second-guessing his every move. Should he have ignored his mother's warnings? Should he have done more to shield Amara from the hurtful comments? But then he remembered their first meeting, the way her laughter had felt like music in his ears, how her presence had filled the room with warmth. She was everything he had ever wanted, and yet, the world seemed determined to take her from him. "I think we need to talk," Ethan said one evening, as he drove Amara home after a rare date. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "About what?" I know things are difficult," he began, his voice low. "I just don't want you to think I'm not taking your feelings seriously. I hate that you're going through all of this just because of me." Amara's gaze softened, but she pulled away slightly, a small gesture that did not go unnoticed. "Ethan, I don't want you to feel guilty. I knew what I was getting into. But sometimes it just feels like too much. Ethan reached for her hand, his grip firm, as though to remind her that he was not going anywhere. I'm sorry for putting you through this, but we're stronger than this, Amara. I know it's hard, but I truly believe we can make it. Her heart swelled with love for him, but the familiar doubts gnawed at her again. You don't know what it's like, Ethan. You don't know how hard it is to be the one everyone looks at like you don't belong. Ethan's jaw clenched, the intensity in his eyes growing. I do know. I may not understand everything you've gone through, but I know that I don't care about their judgment. All I care about is you. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the unspoken words lingering in the air between them. Finally, Amara spoke. Then prove it, Ethan. Her voice was quiet but firm. Don't let them win. Don't let them make us feel like we're not worth fighting for. Ethan nodded, his resolve strengthening. I won't. I'm not going to let anyone take you away from me. As they parked outside her apartment building, Amara hesitated before getting out of the car. You really think this can work, don't you? I know it can, he replied, squeezing her hand one last time. I believe in us. The following days were more difficult than either of them could have anticipated. Ethan's mother, always one to hold on to tradition, refused to let go of her objections. Every conversation with her felt like an uphill battle, as though she saw Ethan's love for Amara as a betrayal, something that tarnished the family's legacy. But it wasn't just his mother. Even his friends, who had once been supportive, now questioned his choices. Man, this is crazy. One of his oldest friends, Kyle, said one evening as they shared drinks at a bar. You've got everything going for you, and now you're with her? Ethan's patience was wearing thin. Don't say it like that. Amara's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Kyle chuckled darkly. You're in love with her, sure. But what about everything else? What about your family, your future? They'll never accept her, Ethan. Ethan stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I'm done talking about this. He threw some cash on the table and walked out, leaving his friends behind. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about Amara's words. Prove it. He had promised her that he would, but how could he show her that his love was real, that it wasn't just about defiance or rebellion? How could he convince her that despite everything, he would fight for their future? The answer came to him the next day when he decided to take action. He wasn't going to wait for his family to accept Amara. He was going to take the first step, even if it meant going against everything he had been raised to believe. He called a lawyer. When he told Amara about his decision, she was shocked. You're really doing this? She asked, her voice wavering. Yes, Ethan replied firmly. I'm going to ask you to marry me, Amara. I don't care about their approval. I care about you. And if that means standing up to my family, then I'll do it. I'll fight for us. Tears welled up in Amara's eyes, but she couldn't find the words. Ethan had just given her everything she had longed for. Security, love, and the belief that she wasn't just a charity case or a second choice. She kissed him softly, whispering against his lips, I love you. I know, he murmured, pulling her closer. And I love you, too. For the first time in months, Amara felt like she could breathe again. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, it didn't feel like she was fighting alone. Love doesn't make the world go round. Love is what makes the ride worthwhile. The days leading up to Ethan's decision were a blur for Amara. She had been caught between the warmth of his love and the cold reality of everything that stood against them. Her mind swirled with doubt, and yet, deep down, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. As Ethan planned to propose, he was determined to make the moment unforgettable. It wasn't just about asking for her hand in marriage. It was about showing her that, no matter the cost, he was willing to stand by her side. It wasn't just an act of love. It was an act of defiance against all the people who said their relationship couldn't work. Ethan had rented a small, intimate venue, an old, rustic restaurant on the outskirts of the city. It had a cozy charm that felt like a secret, just for the two of them. The dim lighting and soft music gave the evening a dreamlike quality, and Amara could hardly believe the lengths Ethan had gone to for this moment. When they arrived, she was stunned by the setting. "Ethan, what is this?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. "You'll see," he replied with a smile, holding her hand tightly as they made their way inside. They were escorted to a private corner by the window, where a table had been set for two, candles flickering softly, casting shadows on the walls. The waiter handed them the menu, but neither of them paid much attention. Their eyes were locked, and the quiet tension of the evening made Amara's heart beat faster. After a while, the waiter returned, bringing a bottle of champagne. He poured 2 glasses and left, closing the door behind him, leaving the couple alone. "Ethan," Amara began hesitantly, still uncertain of what was happening. "What's all this about?" Ethan looked at her with a seriousness that made her breath catch in her throat. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've gone through. The world is never going to be easy for us, Amara. But that's why we have to be strong. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Amara's breath hitched. Was he about to do what she thought he was? "I want to make it official. I want to be with you, no matter what anyone else thinks. And I don't want to just talk about it. I want to show you, every day, how much you mean to me." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, holding it up to her. Amara's eyes filled with tears, the enormity of the moment crashing over her. "I don't want to live in a world where you're not by my side," Ethan continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Will you marry me, Amara?" Amara was frozen for a moment, the words hanging in the air between them. She had always dreamed of being loved, but to be loved so completely, so unconditionally. It felt like something out of a fairy tale. She looked at the ring, the delicate diamond catching the candlelight, and then up at Ethan, who was waiting for her answer with bated breath. "Yes," she whispered, the tears in her eyes blurring her vision. "Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." A smile spread across Ethan's face, and he leaned in to kiss her, the soft press of his lips against hers sealing the promise they had made. When they pulled away, Amara was still in shock. "I never thought this would happen," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I never thought anyone could love me like this." Ethan cupped her face gently, wiping away the tears that had fallen. "You don't ever have to doubt that, Amara. I love you for who you are, and I'll always fight for you." In that moment, Amara felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. The weight of the world, the judgment of others, it didn't matter anymore. She had found someone who truly saw her, not her disability, not her race, but the woman she was inside. The proposal was only the beginning, and though they knew the road ahead would be difficult, Amara no longer felt alone. With Ethan by her side, she believed they could overcome anything. As the evening continued, they talked and laughed, their voices mingling with the soft music in the background. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt free from doubt, free from fear. In that moment, she knew that their love, against all odds, was stronger than anything life could throw at them. And as they left the restaurant, their fingers intertwined, the future seemed brighter than it had ever been. Sometimes, the hardest thing in life is to stand by the person you love when the world tells you not to. The first person Ethan told about the engagement was his older brother, Max. Max had always been the voice of reason, someone Ethan trusted implicitly. But this time, as he shared the news, he could see a shift in Max's expression, a hesitation that didn't sit well with him. "You're really going through with this?" Max asked, his voice calm but laced with disbelief. Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and unease. "Yes, I love her, Max. I'm going to marry Amara." Max leaned back in his chair, studying him for a long moment before speaking again. "Ethan, look, I get that you care about her. But don't you see how complicated this is? You're talking about marrying a woman who's disabled and—" Ethan cut him off before he could finish. "And she's black. I know what you're thinking, Max. But Amara is more than just her disability or her skin color. She's a person, and I love her. Why can't you just accept that?" Max sighed heavily. "It's not that I can't accept it, Ethan. It's that you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of struggle. People won't just look at her as your wife. They'll judge you, too. They'll call you crazy, and you'll be the one who has to face the consequences." Ethan stood up, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I care about her. and that's all that matters. Max shook his head, his tone softening. I'm just trying to look out for you, man. I don't want to see you hurt. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. He had always admired his brother's practicality, but he couldn't let fear of what others might think dictate his life. Amara was worth it, and he was ready to face whatever came their way. I appreciate it, Max, but I've made up my mind. I'm marrying Amara. Max didn't say anything more, but Ethan could see the doubt still lingering in his eyes. The next day, Ethan went to his parents' house to share the news. He had known his parents were conservative, and he wasn't sure how they would react to his engagement to a woman who didn't fit the mold they had always envisioned for him. But he had hoped they would understand. When he told them, the silence that followed was deafening. Ethan, his mother's voice was sharp, filled with disbelief. You're really going to marry her? The girl in the wheelchair? Ethan's heart sank. He had expected resistance, but this felt different. The disapproval in his mother's tone cut deeper than he had anticipated. She's a beautiful woman, Mom, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. And she's strong. She's everything I've been looking for. His father, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke. Son, we've raised you to be smart, to make the right choices. This isn't it. People will talk, they'll judge you. You'll be making your life much harder than it needs to be. Ethan's hands balled into fists, but he kept his composure. This isn't about them. This is about me and Amara. I don't care about anyone's opinions. I'm not asking for their approval. I'm telling you that I'm marrying her because I love her. His mother shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I just don't understand. Why her? Ethan? There are so many women out there who are more suitable. She's different. Don't you see that? Ethan felt his anger rise, but he kept his voice calm. I see her, Mom. I see the person she is. And that's all that matters to me. The conversation ended there, but the tension in the room was palpable. Ethan didn't know how to fix things with his parents, but he knew he couldn't turn back. His heart was set on Amara, and nothing would change that. The next hurdle came when they announced the engagement to Amara's family. She had always been close to her parents, and she knew their reactions would be different, but she didn't expect them to be this difficult. Her mother, a strong, resilient woman, looked at Amara with concern. Are you sure about this, baby? I know Ethan loves you, but the world is not kind to people like us. Amara nodded, feeling the weight of her mother's words. I know, Mom, but Ethan is different. He's not like the others. Her father, usually quiet but firm, spoke up. He's a good man, Amara, but don't think for a second that this won't be hard. People will judge you, call you names. You've seen it happen to other couples. Amara's heart ached. She had hoped for more support, more acceptance from her family, but she understood their fears. They didn't want her to go through the same pain they had endured because of their race. They didn't want to see her hurt. I'm not afraid, Amara said softly, her voice steady. I love him, and he loves me. That's enough for me. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. Just know we'll always be here for you, no matter what. But deep down, Amara knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges. Her family had their doubts, and so did his. The world wasn't kind to their kind of love, but they were determined. Together, they would face the storms that loomed ahead. Love is not about finding someone who is perfect. It's about finding someone who sees you perfectly. Amara and Ethan's love was growing stronger, but the pressure from the world around them was beginning to take its toll. Despite their best efforts to stay strong, every day seemed to bring a new challenge, whether from family, friends, or society itself. The first major test came when they decided to attend a charity gala Ethan had been invited to. It was a high-profile event, one that would be filled with people from his work and social circle, people who had known him as the handsome, successful, and respectable man. He knew this event would be different with Amara by his side. When Amara arrived, dressed in a stunning evening gown that perfectly complemented her beauty, she could see the stares. She had grown used to people staring at her because of her disability, but this was different. The whispers behind their backs were louder, more pronounced. She could almost hear the judgment in every glance. They hadn't even gotten inside before the first comment was made. "Who's that with Ethan?" a woman asked, her voice loud enough for Amara to hear. She looks like she doesn't belong here. What's he doing with her? Ethan, ever the protective partner, put his arm around Amara and guided her into the room, refusing to acknowledge the whispers. But it was clear that Amara had heard them, and it hurt. She wasn't used to being the object of such blatant judgment, and though she tried to keep her composure, the weight of it all was almost too much to bear. Inside, the situation didn't improve. As they mingled with other guests, people barely made eye contact with her. Ethan's colleagues, many of whom were polite but distant, looked at her as though she were an oddity. Some even ignored her entirely, instead choosing to talk to Ethan as if she weren't there. One man, who worked with Ethan, leaned in and whispered just loud enough for Amara to hear. "You sure about this, man? I mean, she's disabled, and, well, you know. It's just not what people expect from you." Ethan's face hardened, and his grip on Amara's hand tightened. "She's my fiancée, and she's more than I could have ever hoped for." But the damage was already done. Amara felt the sting of his words, the subtle yet cutting disapproval that clung to the air. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced smiles and strained conversations, and by the time they left, she was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. As they sat in the car on their way home, Ethan reached for her hand, his voice soft. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Amara. I should have been more prepared." She shook her head, not wanting to burden him with her pain. "No, it's not your fault. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. All the stares, the comments, the feeling like I'm invisible." Ethan's heart ached as he looked at her. "You're never invisible to me. You're beautiful, smart, and strong, Amara. And I'll never stop loving you, no matter what anyone says." But Amara wasn't so sure. She had seen how people looked at them when they were together, like they were something to be pitied or ridiculed. It wasn't just the strangers. Even her own friends, those who had known her before she met Ethan, seemed unsure of her relationship with him. Her best friend, Claire, had called her the night after the gala. Her voice was hesitant, as if she didn't know how to approach the subject. "Amara, I just want to make sure you're okay. I saw the way people were looking at you tonight. You don't deserve that. I just don't want you to get hurt." Amara knew Claire meant well, but the doubt in her voice, the uncertainty, stung. It wasn't the first time Claire had expressed concern about her relationship with Ethan. She had always been cautious, unsure if Ethan could handle the weight of being with a woman like Amara, a woman who was both disabled and black. "I'm fine, Claire," Amara replied, her voice steady, even though she wasn't sure if she truly was. "Ethan loves me, and that's all that matters." But deep down, the fear lingered. Could she really face a lifetime of judgment and prejudice? Could they truly build a future together in a world that seemed so determined to tear them apart? The next few weeks were filled with more obstacles. There were more awkward social gatherings where Amara felt like an outsider. There were more comments, more stares, more people questioning whether Ethan's love was genuine or if he was just doing it for the right reasons. They both knew that the hardest part of their journey wasn't the physical challenges Amara faced, but the emotional toll of being constantly judged. One afternoon, Amara found herself alone, sitting in her apartment, staring at the wedding dress that had been hanging in her closet for weeks. She had always dreamed of a beautiful wedding, but now the thought of walking down the aisle, surrounded by people who might not approve of her or Ethan, filled her with dread. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Am I making a mistake?" she whispered to herself. "Am I strong enough for this?" Ethan had always been her rock, the one who made her feel like she could conquer anything. But now, more than ever, she needed to find her own strength, because the journey ahead would require not just the love of one man, but the courage of two. And as she looked at the dress, she realized something. Love wasn't just about the big moments, the wedding day, or the acceptance of others. Love was about standing together, even when the world said you couldn't. It was about having the strength to endure, no matter what. With a deep breath, she stood up, the doubt in her heart starting to fade. She wasn't just doing this for Ethan. She was doing it for herself, and she was ready to face whatever came next. You have to be brave to be vulnerable. Amara and Ethan's love had always been a force to be reckoned with, But as the weeks wore on, the weight of the world's judgment began to wear them both down. Every time they left their apartment, the looks, the comments, and the whispers were becoming harder to ignore. But the thing that hurt the most wasn't the strangers or even Ethan's colleagues. It was the growing tension between Amara and her own family. Her parents, who had always supported her through thick and thin, were becoming increasingly uneasy with her relationship. It wasn't that they didn't love Ethan. They did, in their own way. But the cultural and racial divide between him and their daughter had started to chip away at their comfort. They loved Amara, but they couldn't quite understand why she had chosen this path. It came to a head one evening when Amara invited her parents over for dinner. She hoped it would be a chance to sit down and talk, to reassure them that her love for Ethan was real and that she wasn't making a mistake. But as the evening unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "Amara, honey, we just want you to be happy," her mother said, her voice gentle but laced with concern. "But we've been hearing things, and I have to ask, why him? Why Ethan?" Amara felt the familiar sting of tears behind her eyes. She had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier. "Mom, I love him. He's everything I've ever wanted. He sees me for who I am, not just my disability, not just the color of my skin. He loves me because of who I am inside." Her father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "But, Amara, the world isn't kind to people like him, and you're going to face so much hate. We've already seen it, heard it. People don't understand. He doesn't understand." Amara swallowed the lump in her throat. "You think I don't know that? I see it every day. I feel it. But it doesn't change how I feel about him." Her mother shook her head. "I just want you to be careful. We want you to be happy, but I don't want you to get hurt, not by him or by the world." The word stung more than Amara cared to admit. She had always been her parents' little girl, the one they'd protected, the one they'd sheltered from the world's harshness. But now, as she looked at them, she felt like she was caught between two worlds, the one they had created for her and the one she was trying to build with Ethan. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if her family could understand her choices. Ethan could sense the tension in the air when he picked Amara up later that evening. He had been waiting outside, his usual smile absent as he noticed the way Amara avoided his gaze. She climbed into the car and let out a long, weary sigh. "How'd it go?" he asked, trying to sound upbeat. Amara didn't look at him. "They don't get it, Ethan. They're scared. They think I'm making a mistake. They think you're going to hurt me." Ethan's heart sank. "I would never hurt you, Amara. You know that, right?" She nodded, though her voice trembled when she spoke. "I know, but I don't know how to make them understand. It's like they see us as a mistake, something wrong. I'm just so tired of trying to prove we belong together." Ethan's hand found hers, squeezing it gently. "I know it's hard, but I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. We'll make them see in time." But Amara wasn't sure. The more they fought for their love, the more it seemed like the world was fighting back. She had never felt more alone, even with Ethan by her side. The emotional toll was starting to show on both of them. Amara wasn't just fighting against the prejudice of strangers. She was fighting against the very people who had loved her and supported her all her life. Then came a moment that would change everything. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Amara was sitting alone at the park, her thoughts swirling around her. She had gone there to think, to clear her mind. The sound of children laughing in the distance did nothing to soothe her. As she sat on the bench, she felt a tap on her shoulder, and when she turned around, her best friend Claire stood there, a hesitant look on her face. "Claire," Amara said softly, her voice almost a whisper, "I didn't expect to see you here." Claire sat beside her, not saying anything for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night, about how Ethan is the one who sees you, who really sees you. And, I don't know, Amara, I think I might have been wrong." Amara blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" I think I was scared. I didn't want to see you get hurt, but I know you, and I know how strong you are. And if Ethan makes you happy, then maybe I should just support that." Amara felt a lump form in her throat. She had never expected Claire to say something like that. For the first time in weeks, She felt a glimmer of hope. You really think so? Claire nodded. I do. I've been watching you, Amara, and I see the way Ethan looks at you. Like you're the most important person in the world. And maybe that's all that matters. You're not making a mistake. The tears that had been threatening to fall all day finally spilled over. Amara wiped them away quickly, not wanting to seem weak. But Claire's words had broken through the walls she had built around herself. I just wish my parents could see it like you do, Amara said, her voice thick with emotion. Claire reached out and hugged her. They will. It just takes time. But don't give up on what you have with Ethan. It's real, and it's worth fighting for. Amara clung to Claire's words, a sense of calm washing over her for the first time in days. She realized that this wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about trusting in herself and in the love she and Ethan shared. With a renewed sense of determination, Amara stood up, her gaze firm as she looked toward the future. She wasn't going to let fear or doubt rule her. She was going to fight for the love she deserved, and she would start by fighting for herself. And no matter how hard the road ahead seemed, she knew one thing for certain. She was not alone. You can't control how others see you, but you can control how you see yourself. The following week, Amara found herself more resolved than ever. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she had made a promise to herself that she wouldn't let the world dictate her happiness. The support from Claire, combined with the love Ethan had shown her, was all the strength she needed to move forward. Yet, no matter how much confidence she gained, the external pressure only seemed to increase. Ethan could tell something had shifted in Amara. She had become more focused, more determined. When they spent time together, it wasn't just about fighting the world's expectations anymore. It was about proving to each other that they could thrive together, no matter what anyone thought. I don't want you to feel like you have to prove anything to me, Amara, Ethan said one evening as they sat together on the couch in their apartment. He could see how tired she was, the strain of being constantly on guard taking its toll. You've been through so much already. Amara met his eyes, her resolve clear. I don't feel like I'm proving anything to you, Ethan. I'm proving it to myself. I'm tired of feeling like I don't belong anywhere. But with you, I finally feel like I'm home. Ethan smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. He knew this wasn't just about their love. It was about her finding peace within herself. And as much as he wanted to shield her from the world's cruelty, he knew he couldn't change how people saw her, how they saw them. I just don't want you to burn out, Ethan added gently. I know it's hard, but we'll get through this. I'm here for you, always. I know, she whispered, leaning against his shoulder. And that's why I can do this, because I'm not alone anymore. The following weekend, Amara decided to take a bold step. She had always been a quiet presence in her community, attending church, helping out at local events, and occasionally volunteering at an outreach program for disabled children. But this time, she wanted to stand up, to be seen, and to show people that love didn't have boundaries. Ethan had been apprehensive, but he didn't stop her. You sure you want to do this? I mean, the neighborhood, it's a small place, Amara. People talk. Amara took his hand, giving him a soft smile. I know they do, but they've been talking about us for months, and I'm still standing. I'm tired of hiding who I am. I'm tired of apologizing for loving you. Ethan's heart swelled with pride. I'm proud of you, but if you change your mind, I won't. She cut him off gently. This is the right thing to do. That afternoon, they attended a local community event, a street fair organized to raise funds for disabled veterans. Amara had been involved with the charity for years, but this time, she wasn't going to just attend as a quiet volunteer. She was going to stand with Ethan, to hold his hand, and show the world that their love was real, no matter the obstacles. The moment they arrived, Amara felt the eyes of the crowd on them. It wasn't the usual warmth and familiarity she had come to expect from the locals. It was different. There was a chill in the air, as if they were waiting for something, for her to prove something. Amara straightened her back and walked beside Ethan, determined not to let the whispers get to her. They had spent weeks preparing for this. She was tired of shrinking in the face of judgment. As they approached the event's main table, a few familiar faces smiled at them, though Amara noticed that some people's smiles were forced. But there was one person who wasn't pretending. Denise, a fellow volunteer, was the first to approach them with open arms. Amara, Ethan, I'm so glad you could make it today. I've been hearing some buzz about you too, and I just wanted to say, I admire you both so much. It's not easy what you're doing. Amara was taken aback by Denise's warmth. She wasn't used to hearing such words of support, especially not in public. But as Denise continued, something shifted in the crowd. People started to look up, to take notice of the way Amara and Ethan held themselves. They weren't backing down. They weren't ashamed. For the first time in a long time, Amara felt a sense of pride swell inside her. She wasn't just standing beside Ethan. She was standing for herself, for the life they were building together. Ethan, sensing the change, squeezed her hand. See? You're already making a difference. Amara smiled back at him. It's just the beginning. The rest of the day passed by in a blur. Amara helped with organizing the event, spoke with other volunteers, and laughed with Ethan as they shared stories and exchanged smiles. It wasn't the overwhelming confrontation she had feared. It was just life, continuing on, with all its challenges and its beauty. When they left the event later that evening, Amara felt lighter. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more people who didn't understand their love. But she also knew that they were stronger than any prejudice, stronger than any judgment. They had each other. That night, as they lay in bed, Ethan wrapped his arms around her, whispering words of encouragement as she drifted to sleep. Amara closed her eyes, thinking of the future. A future where love was truly blind to race, disability, and expectation. And no matter how long the journey, she was ready to walk it, hand in hand with the man she loved. You can't change the world overnight, but you can change the way you live in it. Amara woke up the next morning with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of last night's quiet victory still lingered in the air, reminding her that there was power in living authentically, no matter how much resistance you faced. However, the joy she felt in those private moments was overshadowed by the subtle whispers of the world around her. People weren't just speaking in hushed tones. The rumors about her and Ethan were no longer confined to just the tight-knit circles of their community. They were starting to spread, and some of the whispers were cruel. It was as if the moment she had stepped into the light, their love had become a spectacle for people to pick apart. Some people at the street fair had smiled, but others had muttered under their breath, exchanged glances, and quietly judged them for daring to break what they saw as an unwritten rule. But Amara had made a promise to herself. She would not allow others to dictate her worth, and she certainly wouldn't let them ruin what she had with Ethan. "Do you want to talk about it?" Ethan asked as he poured them both coffee in the quiet of their apartment that morning. The tension in her silence wasn't lost on him. Amara didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned against the counter, running her fingers over the edge of her coffee cup. She could feel the weight of every word that had been thrown her way in the past few days. She had always known that being different would come with a price, but the realization that the world still wasn't ready for her love with Ethan hurt more than she expected. "I'm just tired of it, Ethan," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "The looks, the comments, it feels like no matter what we do, we're never going to be enough for them." Ethan stepped closer, setting down the coffee pot before taking her hands in his. His eyes were steady, filled with love and unwavering support. "Amara, we don't need to prove anything to anyone. What matters is what we have, what we've built together. I know it's hard. It's always going to be hard, but I will never stop loving you, and I will never let them make you feel less than you are." She looked up at him, feeling the truth of his words sink into her heart. But there was still that gnawing fear that their love, the very thing that gave her strength, might not be enough to weather the storm that was growing around them. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "What if the world never accepts us? What if we're always going to be those people, the ones who didn't fit in, the ones who fought for something that was never meant to be?" Ethan reached up, gently lifting her chin to meet his gaze. "Amara, the world doesn't get to decide who we are. We do, and I choose you. I've chosen you every day since I met you, and I'll keep choosing you. The rest of the world can stay stuck in their small minds, but we have something real, something that can't be broken. Amara felt the tightness in her chest loosen, the burden she carried in her heart lightened by his words. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe him. She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as it seemed. But then, like a cold slap to her face, her phone buzzed with a text notification, pulling her back into reality. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. The message was from Claire, her best friend. "I saw something today, Amara. I know you're trying to keep a low profile, but someone shared a post about you and Ethan online. They're calling you both a joke. People are really talking." Amara's stomach twisted as she read the words. She had known it was only a matter of time before someone took their private moments and twisted them into something cruel. It wasn't the first time someone had commented on their relationship in a negative way, but this felt different. It felt personal. Ethan watched her closely, noticing the change in her expression. "What is it? People are calling us a joke, Ethan. They're saying I'm some kind of charity case, that you're only with me because you want to prove something. It's like they can't stand seeing us happy." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stepped closer to her, pulling her into an embrace. "I'm sorry, Amara. I wish I could protect you from all of it." Amara's fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt. She had expected this. She had known this moment would come, but knowing didn't make it hurt any less. "Don't apologize for this," she said, pulling back just enough to meet his eyes. "None of this is your fault. I know who we are, and I know that this is worth fighting for." Ethan nodded, kissing the top of her head. "You're right. We've come so far, Amara. This is just another challenge we'll face together, and I won't let it tear us apart." Amara nodded, her mind racing with the weight of the words on her phone. She had dealt with judgment before, from friends, from strangers. But now, the stakes felt higher. Now, the judgment was public, and it was growing louder. "I don't know if I can keep fighting this fight, Ethan," she said softly. "What if it never ends? What if we're always just fighting against what people think we should be?" Ethan gently cupped her face in his hands, making her look up at him. "We'll always be fighting for what's ours, Amara. But we don't have to do it alone. You've got me, and I've got you. That's all that matters." Amara felt a spark of hope ignite inside her, despite the shadows that loomed over them. The road ahead wasn't easy, but at least she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't walking it alone. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love could conquer all. People always say that love is the answer, but it's also the question. The days that followed were a blur. Amara and Ethan continued their daily routines, but it wasn't the same. The tension from the outside world crept into their lives, and their love, which had once been a quiet sanctuary, now felt like it was being tested at every turn. At work, Amara felt the glances of her colleagues, some of them sympathetic, others clearly uncomfortable. The subtle shifts in behavior told her everything she needed to know. Some people had begun to distance themselves from her, unsure how to react to her relationship with Ethan. She had always been a strong woman, but this was different. It was hard to look past the judgment and the quiet whispers. And the worst part was knowing Ethan was feeling it too. The world was turning them into something they weren't. A spectacle, an oddity, something that didn't quite fit. One afternoon, Amara found herself at a local coffee shop, sitting alone at a table in the corner. She hadn't wanted to come here, not really. But the noise of her apartment felt too overwhelming, and the weight of the world's expectations hung heavy on her chest. As she stared out the window, her phone buzzed. She hesitated before checking it, knowing it was probably another message about her and Ethan. But to her surprise, it was a call from her mother. "Hey, Mama," Amara answered, putting the phone to her ear. She tried to sound as casual as possible, but there was a tightness in her voice that didn't go unnoticed. "Amara," her mother's voice came through, warm but serious. "We need to talk." Amara's heart skipped a beat. She had been avoiding conversations like this one for weeks now, knowing that her mother's stance on her relationship with Ethan had never been fully supportive. "What's going on, Mama?" "I've seen the posts. I've heard the things people are saying. You know I love you, right? But this isn't easy for me. I'm worried, Amara. I'm worried about what people will think of you, what they'll think of him, what this will do to your life." Amara felt her stomach twist. Mama, I understand that you're concerned, but I'm happy. Ethan loves me, and I love him. That's all that matters. I know you think that now, her mother replied, her voice softening, but you can't ignore what's happening around you. You're walking into a storm, baby. People will never understand. I don't need them to understand, Amara said, her voice growing more firm. I'm not doing this for anyone else. I'm doing this because I found someone who loves me, who sees me for who I really am. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, Amara wondered if her mother had hung up, but then she spoke again. I just want you to be careful. I want you to be sure that this isn't going to hurt you in the long run. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her mother's words settle deep inside her. It was hard. She had always dreamed of her mother's approval, but in this case, it felt like she would never get it. Not unless she gave up on the one thing that had brought her true happiness. I know you love me, Mama, Amara said quietly, swallowing the lump in her throat. But this is my life. I have to live it for me. And I'm not going to let anyone dictate who I should love. Her mother was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. I can't tell you what to do, Amara. You're an adult. But just be careful. That's all I'm asking. I will, Mama. I promise. After the call ended, Amara sat back in her chair, taking a deep breath. She was grateful for her mother's love, but there was a sharp sting in her heart, knowing that even the people closest to her couldn't fully support her choices. It was a reminder of how far she had come, and how far she still had to go. Later that day, Ethan arrived at her apartment, his face etched with concern. He had noticed the tension in her eyes, the subtle way she had withdrawn over the past few days. You okay? He asked, setting down his bag and walking over to where she was sitting. Amara nodded, trying to force a smile. Yeah, just tired. You know how it is. He didn't buy it. Ethan sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. You're not alone in this, Amara. I know things have been tough, but I'm right here with you. Every step of the way. We'll figure this out together. Amara leaned into him, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. I don't know, Ethan. Sometimes it feels like it's just too much. The looks, the comments, the constant pressure to prove that we're not some joke. It's exhausting. Ethan gently brushed her hair away from her face, his touch tender. It is exhausting. But you don't have to prove anything to anyone. We know the truth. We know how we feel about each other. And that's what matters. Not what anyone else thinks. Amara closed her eyes, resting her head on his shoulder. I wish it were that simple. It is, Ethan said softly, kissing the top of her head. We just have to keep believing in ourselves. The rest of the world will catch up eventually. For a moment, everything felt still. The noise of the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of warmth and understanding. Amara let out a long breath, her shoulders finally relaxing. I'm not giving up on us, Ethan, no matter what anyone says. He smiled, his hand resting gently on hers. Neither am I. And for the first time in weeks, Amara felt the hope that had once burned brightly within her flicker back to life. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick, but she was willing to keep fighting, for herself, for Ethan, and for the love they had found in each other, no matter what the world said. Love is not a matter of counting the years, but making the years count. Life continued, though the constant pressure from the outside world was never far from their minds. Amara had always been someone who preferred to stay out of the spotlight, but now, it seemed that their relationship was a public matter. The whispers, the glances, each day brought new challenges. She could feel it everywhere she went. The stares from strangers, the casual racism that lingered in some of her co-workers' offhand comments, the uncomfortable silences when people realized who she was dating. But what hurt the most wasn't the way the world treated her. It was the way it treated Ethan. She had always known that their relationship would come with challenges, but watching him face prejudice, judgment, and ridicule made her heart ache in ways she had never imagined. Ethan, strong and composed as always, had begun to wear the weight of the world on his shoulders. One evening, after a particularly tough day at work, Amara arrived home to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, his head buried in his hands. His suit jacket was draped across the back of the chair, and his tie had been loosened, an indication of the stress he had been carrying. "Ethan?" Amara's voice was soft as she approached him, sitting down beside him. "What's going on?" He looked up at her, his eyes tired. But there was something else there. Something raw, something vulnerable that she wasn't used to seeing. "I can't do this anymore, Amara. It's like I don't belong anywhere. My family's upset with me. My friends don't know what to say to me. I'm getting looks everywhere I go. And I'm supposed to just pretend it doesn't hurt?" Amara's heart sank. She had always seen Ethan as unshakable, but now she could see that the weight of everything was beginning to crush him. She reached out, taking his hand gently. "Ethan, you don't have to carry all of this alone. We're in this together. I know it's hard, and I know people can be cruel, but you're not doing anything wrong. You're loving me. You're being true to yourself. And that's worth more than anything." Ethan exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on her hand. "I wish it were that simple. I don't care what people think about me, but I hate seeing you hurt. I hate seeing how much this is taking out of you." Amara leaned forward, brushing a strand of his hair from his forehead. "I'm not hurting, Ethan. I'm just trying to navigate this world. I've been doing it my whole life, and I don't want you to carry the burden of it all. We're both stronger than we think." Ethan's gaze softened, his fingers gently tracing the back of her hand. "You're right. Sometimes it feels like I'm losing everything because I'm not fitting into the mold people want me to. I'm not supposed to love you, not the way I do." Amara smiled, a small, tender smile. "Maybe that's true, but I don't care about the mold. I care about you, and you care about me. That's all that matters." The two of them sat there in silence for a while, the weight of the world seeming a little lighter in each other's presence. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick, but Amara knew that their love could weather anything together. The next few weeks were a blur of public events, work commitments, and family gatherings that only made their relationship feel more like a battle. Ethan and Amara spent hours on the phone with each other, keeping each other grounded. He talked about the prejudice he faced at work, about the stares and comments from strangers. She spoke about the feeling of isolation she experienced when she went to her family's home for dinner, where the silence spoke volumes about their disapproval. But amid it all, there was one thing they both knew for sure. They were in this together, and their love was real. One afternoon, while Amara was at work, she received a call from an unknown number. It was an unfamiliar voice on the other end, but the words they spoke sent a chill down her spine. "Amara," the voice said, "we know what you're doing. You think this is a love story, but all it is a farce. You're with a man who doesn't understand the consequences of his actions. You're playing with fire, and you're going to get burned." Amara's heart raced as she listened, her mind racing. She had dealt with racial prejudice her whole life, but the vehemence of this call was something new. The threat of harm lingered in the silence that followed. She slammed the phone down, her hand shaking. For a moment, she was paralyzed with fear. Was this just another cruel prank? Or was it something more? Her thoughts swirled in a haze of worry and confusion. As much as she tried to push it aside, the words gnawed at her. "You're playing with fire." That evening, Ethan came over to her apartment, his eyes immediately locking onto the tension in her posture as soon as he entered. "Amara, what's wrong?" She exhaled sharply, her throat tight. "I got a call today. Someone threatened me." His expression hardened, and without another word, he was pulling her into his arms. "Don't listen to them, Amara. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not worth it. You are. We are. They can't tear us apart." Amara clung to him, grateful for the strength he was offering, even as the weight of the world pressed down on both of them. She knew the road ahead would be rocky. There would be more challenges, more people trying to tear them down. But in that moment, she knew one thing for sure. Their love was stronger than any threat or judgment. And no matter what the world tried to do, they would never let it go. They were in this fight together, and they would win. Through every storm, you've been my anchor. Together, we will weather it all. The threat had shaken Amara to her core. It wasn't the first time she'd faced discrimination or prejudice, but the intensity of this attack, the personal nature of the threat, was different. She had spent years building a wall around herself, a wall that protected her from the judgment of the world. But this was something that no wall could keep out. Ethan could see the strain in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she picked up a cup, the tightness in her shoulders as she moved around the apartment. He wanted to protect her from the cruelty of the world, but he knew that he couldn't shield her from everything. But he could be there for her. He could be her anchor, as he had promised. For the next few days, Amara became withdrawn. She continued going to work, though she felt as if the eyes of the world were on her at all times. She could feel the undercurrents of judgment wherever she went, the murmurs in the office, the sideways glances from coworkers, the phone calls from family members who just wanted to check in. At night, she found solace in Ethan's arms. He stayed close to her, offering her all the comfort he could. He had been her rock, and now more than ever, he proved to her that love was more than just an emotion. It was a shield, a fortress against the world. One afternoon, a week after the phone call, Amara received another call. This time, it was from her mother. "Amara, are you sure about this?" Her mother's voice was tight with concern. "I know how much you've struggled, and I just don't want to see you hurt. You know how people are, how society is. Ethan, he's a good man, but he doesn't understand what this means. He'll never understand." Amara's heart sank. Her mother's disapproval was nothing new, but the weight of her words was heavier now. Her mother had always been distant, and the bitterness toward her relationship with Ethan only added to the distance between them. Amara wanted to scream, to tell her mother that she didn't need anyone's approval to live her life, but she didn't. She took a deep breath and spoke softly, "Mom, I'm doing this because I love him, because he loves me. That's enough." Her mother was silent for a moment, and Amara could almost hear the conflict in her voice. "I don't know, Amara. I don't know if that's enough." "Then you don't know me, Mom," Amara replied, her voice firm. "This is my choice, and I'm not backing down. Ethan is the man I want to spend my life with. And if you can't accept that, then maybe it's time for us to stop pretending." She hung up, her hands shaking. Every conversation with her mother felt like a battle, a war she couldn't win. But this time, she didn't feel defeated. She felt empowered. She had Ethan by her side, and that was all that mattered. Ethan could see the weight of everything pressing down on Amara, and it broke his heart. He had always been the one who wanted to protect her, but he was starting to realize that there was only so much he could do. He couldn't make her mother love him, and he couldn't stop the world from judging them, but he could make her feel safe. That weekend, Ethan took Amara to a secluded beach, far away from the prying eyes of the world. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the ocean. Ethan spread out a blanket on the sand, and they sat down together, the quiet sound of the waves crashing against the shore the only noise. "I don't want you to carry this burden alone," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "Whatever you need, I'll be here. Always." Amara leaned her head against his shoulder, her eyes focused on the horizon. "It's just hard, Ethan. I've spent my whole life trying to protect myself from the world. But now, I'm not just protecting myself. I'm protecting us." Ethan's heart swelled with love for her. He knew that her struggle was one of both strength and vulnerability. Amara had always been resilient, but now, more than ever, she needed to believe that she wasn't alone. "You don't have to protect us, Amara," he said softly. "We're stronger together. And as long as we have each other, we can face anything." For the first time in a long while, Amara smiled. A small, uncertain smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Maybe you're right." As time passed, the world's judgment continued to be a constant presence in their lives, but slowly, the power of their love began to shine through. They weren't perfect, and they certainly weren't immune to the weight of prejudice and criticism, but they were unbreakable. Amara's confidence began to grow. She started to speak out more, to assert herself in ways she had never done before. She wasn't just fighting for her love anymore. She was fighting for herself, for her right to be seen, to be loved, and to live her truth without fear. Ethan, too, began to find his voice. He stopped apologizing for their love. He no longer let the disapproval of his family or the harsh comments of strangers define him. He had made a choice, and that choice was Amara. Together, They had become an unbreakable force, two people who loved each other deeply, defying the odds and proving that love wasn't just a feeling. It was an act of rebellion. It was the courage to stand up to the world and say, "We are enough." And in that quiet rebellion, they found their freedom. Every step we've taken, every word we've spoken, has led us to this moment, and I wouldn't change a thing. The months that followed their trip to the beach were transformative. Amara and Ethan's bond deepened as they faced life's challenges together. The prejudice, the hate, and the whispers from society didn't go away, but it no longer had the same power over them. Ethan had quit trying to make people understand. He had realized that he didn't need to convince the world of his love for Amara. What mattered was their commitment to each other. He watched as Amara grew more confident every day. There was a fire in her that he hadn't seen before, a quiet, determined strength, and he couldn't have been prouder. Amara's career began to flourish in ways she hadn't expected. After months of pushing through self-doubt and fighting against the world's prejudices, she earned a promotion at her job. The new role was challenging, but it gave her a sense of purpose. She had always wanted to help others, to make a difference. Now, she was doing just that. The move to a higher position wasn't just a professional success, it was a personal triumph. Every step she took in her career felt like a step away from the insecurity and doubt that had once held her back. It was a victory for her, for Ethan, and for their relationship. But as her career blossomed, so did their relationship. Ethan had always been supportive, but now he could see the shift in her. She wasn't just his partner. She was a force in her own right, and he couldn't help but admire her more every day. There were still moments when Amara questioned everything. There were still days when the weight of the world seemed unbearable. She still had doubts, especially about her relationship with Ethan. Could it really survive the constant barrage of judgment? Was it fair to put him through this kind of scrutiny, this constant pressure? But every time she looked into his eyes, every time he whispered that he loved her, those doubts began to fade. Her mother still hadn't come around. The calls from her family continued, each one more desperate than the last. But Amara had stopped listening to them. She had found her peace in Ethan. She had found her peace in herself. It wasn't long before their love reached a milestone, one that neither of them had expected so soon. They had talked about it in passing, but now it was happening. Ethan was going to propose. He had known for a while that Amara was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. But the more they grew together, the more he realized that nothing in this world could tear them apart. She was his soulmate, and nothing could ever change that. He had planned the proposal carefully. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. It was on the same beach where they had first found peace, far away from the world's harsh gaze. The setting sun bathed the beach in a golden light, casting long shadows on the sand. Ethan knelt down in the soft sand, the sound of the waves crashing gently in the background. Amara was standing before him, her eyes shining with a mix of surprise and wonder. "Amara," Ethan said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You've shown me what true love is. You've shown me how strong you are, how powerful our love can be. You are my heart, my home. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Amara's eyes as she looked at him, the question hanging in the air. She had never been one for grand gestures, but this moment felt like everything she had ever wanted. It wasn't just about the proposal. It was about the life they had already built together, the journey they had already taken. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will." The world around them faded as Ethan stood up and took her in his arms. He kissed her gently, as if sealing their promise to each other with the soft touch of his lips. In that moment, it was just the two of them, two souls, bound by love, standing together in the face of everything. Their future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready to face whatever came their way. Together. The days following their engagement were filled with excitement and planning. But even more so, they were filled with a deeper understanding of each other. There were still moments when Amara felt the sting of racism, the weight of the world's judgment. There were still days when Ethan felt torn between his love for Amara and the expectations of his family. But now, they faced those challenges as a team. And when the time came for their wedding, it was everything they had dreamed of and more. It was a simple ceremony, surrounded by the people who truly mattered to them, friends who had supported them, loved ones who had embraced them, and even strangers who had witnessed their journey and admired their courage. Amara wore a dress that made her feel beautiful, not just for Ethan, but for herself. Ethan, in his suit, stood beside her with pride, his eyes filled with love and admiration. Their vows were heartfelt, promises to continue fighting, to continue loving, and to never let anything tear them apart. It wasn't just a ceremony. It was the culmination of their journey, the beginning of their new life together. They danced under the stars, surrounded by love and acceptance, their hearts full of hope for the future. And in that moment, the world faded away. There was no hate, no judgment, only the love they had for each other. Together, they had defied the odds. Together, they had built a life full of love, respect, and understanding. Together, they were unstoppable, and they would face whatever came next, together. It's never the easy path that's worth walking, but the one that tests you, that makes you stronger. In the months following their wedding, Amara and Ethan's life seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm. They bought a small house on the outskirts of the city, a quiet home with a garden where Amara could plant flowers, a dream she had held since childhood. Ethan continued with his work, and Amara's career blossomed further. They were both so consumed by their joy that it felt as if nothing could ever threaten the life they had built. But life, as always, had a way of throwing challenges their way. It started small, just a few whispers, a few odd looks from strangers when they went out in public. People in the neighborhood made offhand comments as they passed by. Amara, always sensitive to the way others viewed her, noticed the slight shifts in the way she was treated. People seemed to talk just a little louder when she was around, their eyes a little more focused on her. Ethan noticed it too, but he didn't know how to fix it. At first, they tried to ignore it. After all, they had built this beautiful life together. But the tension in the air was palpable, and soon enough, it began to escalate. One afternoon, as they were walking back from the grocery store, a car slowed down as it passed them. The window rolled down, and a man's voice shouted something cruel and racist at Amara, something designed to hurt her, to remind her that she didn't belong in this world with Ethan. Amara froze, her heart racing. Ethan's hand instinctively reached for hers, squeezing it tightly. The words stung, but they weren't new. Amara had faced this kind of hatred before. On the streets, at work, even in her own family. But hearing it so blatantly, in front of Ethan, in front of people she had come to trust, made the wound feel deeper. "Don't listen to them," Ethan said softly, his voice steady but filled with frustration. "They're just ignorant." But Amara couldn't stop herself from looking at the retreating car, the hate still hanging in the air. She had grown tired of the fight, tired of the constant need to prove her worth. "It's not about them," she said quietly, almost to herself. "It's about what it's doing to us. To you." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't just that people were rude to them. It was how it made Amara feel, how it made her doubt her place in the world. He knew that was the most painful part of it all. The situation worsened over the next few weeks. The subtle whispers grew louder, and the couple began to feel like strangers in their own home. Amara started to doubt herself again, her confidence shaken by the world outside their front door. She had worked so hard to overcome her insecurities, but now they felt like a tidal wave crashing over her once again. Ethan noticed the change in her. He saw the sadness in her eyes, the way she pulled away when he tried to talk to her about it. She began to question everything, their relationship, her place in Ethan's life, their future. The doubts crept in, whispering that maybe she wasn't good enough for him, that maybe their love wasn't worth the fight. It tore him apart to see her like this, and it tore him apart even more to see that there was nothing he could do to make it go away. He couldn't shield her from the cruelty of the world. He couldn't make the hatred disappear. But he wasn't going to let her slip away from him. Not now. Not ever. "You're everything to me, Amara," Ethan told her one night as they sat together in their living room, the weight of the conversation pressing down on both of them. "I don't care what the world thinks. You're the woman I love, and I'm not going to let anyone make you feel less than that." Amara wiped away a tear, but the doubt remained. I don't know if I can keep going like this, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting. I love you, Ethan, but sometimes it feels like I'm fighting a battle I can't win. Ethan reached for her hand, pulling her gently into his arms. You don't have to fight it alone. You've never had to fight alone. And you're not going to start now. We fight this together. Always. Amara let out a shaky breath, her heart heavy but full of love for him. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be fair. But with Ethan by her side, she knew they could face anything. She had to believe that. The next day, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't stand by and watch Amara suffer in silence any longer. He had always fought for their love, but now it was time to take a stand for it in a way he hadn't before. Ethan made a public post on social media, something he had never done before. It wasn't just a simple "I love my wife" post. It was a declaration, a statement to the world that Amara was the woman he loved, and he was proud of her, of everything she had overcome, and of everything they had built together. It was a small act, but to Amara, it meant everything. It wasn't just about the gesture. It was about him showing her, in front of everyone, that he stood by her, no matter what. The reaction from their friends was immediate. Support flooded in. Their friends rallied around them, reminding them that love was more powerful than hate. But more than anything, the post sent a message to the world. A message that no matter how many times people tried to break them, their love was unshakable. And for the first time in a long time, Amara began to feel a flicker of hope again. The world will always try to tell you who you are, but the only opinion that truly matters is your own. As the weeks passed, Amara began to feel the weight of her doubts lift, even if only a little. Ethan's public declaration of love had touched something deep inside her, a reminder that she was not alone, that they were in this together. The world outside their home might have been hostile, but inside, they created a space where love and support reigned. Still, the challenges didn't disappear. If anything, they intensified. One day, Amara was invited to give a lecture at a prestigious business conference. It was a huge opportunity, one she had worked for, dreamed of. But the excitement was quickly overshadowed by the pressure she felt as she prepared. The thought of being in a room full of successful people, many of whom she knew would be judging her not just for her career but for her marriage to Ethan, made her stomach turn. The night before the conference, she confided in Ethan, her voice laced with anxiety. "What if they judge me?" she asked, her hands wringing nervously. "What if they look at me and think, why is she here? What does she have to offer?" Ethan took her hands in his grip firm and reassuring. "They'll judge you for being a woman. They'll judge you for being black. They'll judge you for being married to me. But none of that matters. What matters is that you are brilliant, Amara. You've earned your place there. You have so much to offer. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Amara looked into his eyes, finding the strength she needed in his unwavering belief in her. The truth was, he had always been her anchor, grounding her whenever the storm of self-doubt threatened to pull her under. With him by her side, she could face whatever came her way. The next day, as she stood before the crowd at the conference, Amara felt the familiar knot of nervousness in her stomach. The room was filled with professionals, men and women in sharp suits, all with high expectations. She was about to speak about innovation, about how businesses could embrace diversity and inclusion to create more sustainable and successful environments. It was a topic she was passionate about, but the pressure of being the only black woman in the room, of representing more than just herself, weighed heavily on her. As she began her presentation, her voice was shaky at first, but then something clicked. She remembered Ethan's words, the strength in his eyes. She remembered the journey she had been on, the battles she had fought, and the love that had carried her through it all. Slowly but surely, she found her rhythm. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a beat before the applause began. A few people even stood. Amara stood there, feeling a rush of pride and accomplishment. She had done it. She had faced her fears, and she had come out stronger on the other side. After the lecture, a few attendees approached her to congratulate her. But one woman, a senior executive at a well-known company, took a different approach. "You know," she said, "I've heard a lot about you. And I have to say, I admire your courage, both in your career and your personal life. It's not easy what you're doing. Amara raised an eyebrow, confused by the comment. What do you mean? The woman glanced around, then leaned in slightly. You're married to a white man, aren't you? In a world where it's so easy to let people's judgments define us, you've found a way to build your own happiness. That's something a lot of people can't do. And I think that's why you'll keep rising. People like you, who can't be broken, change the game. The woman's words hit Amara harder than she expected. It was one thing to hear Ethan say that they were strong, but to hear it from someone else, someone who knew the world they were in, was different. In that moment, Amara realized that she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. She had earned her place in that room, not because of who she was married to, but because of who she was as a person. When Amara returned home later that evening, Ethan was waiting for her, as he always was, with a warm embrace. She could see the pride in his eyes, even before she said anything. How did it go? He asked, his voice full of anticipation. I did it, Amara replied, a wide smile spreading across her face. I actually did it, and I think I'm finally starting to believe that I belong. Ethan hugged her tighter, lifting her off the ground as he spun her around. Of course you do. You've always belonged. But I'm so proud of you for seeing it yourself. As they stood there, holding each other, Amara realized something important. No matter how the world saw them, no matter what people said or thought, their love was a force to be reckoned with. It wasn't just about defying expectations. It was about breaking barriers, challenging norms, and proving that love, true love, was stronger than any prejudice. And as Amara took a deep breath, she knew that this was just the beginning. They had already overcome so much together. Now, they were ready for whatever came next. Success isn't final, failure isn't fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. Amara's recent achievements at the conference had boosted her confidence, but she knew that the road ahead would still be challenging. As much as she had accomplished, she couldn't ignore the subtle but persistent undercurrent of prejudice that still ran through society. The more successful she became, the more she would have to fight not just for her place but for her identity. But she wasn't alone. Ethan had been her biggest supporter, her rock, through it all. Still, there were moments when the weight of the world outside their bubble felt suffocating. A few weeks after the conference, Amara received an unexpected invitation. A high-profile company wanted her to join their executive team. It was a dream offer, a role that would propel her career to new heights, offering influence, power, and the kind of respect she had always craved. But there was a catch. The position required her to relocate to another city, away from Ethan and their life together. Amara spent days torn between the promise of a brighter future and the reality of leaving behind the life she had built with Ethan. She wasn't sure she was ready to face the judgment of others again, this time on an even bigger scale. One evening, she sat down with Ethan, her hands trembling as she held the offer letter. Ethan, this could be everything we've dreamed of, she said softly, but it also feels like it's taking me further from you. What if this changes everything? What if it drives us apart? Ethan took her hands, his gaze steady. Amara, I know this is a big decision, but I also know that you're capable of handling it. You've worked so hard to get here. We'll find a way to make it work. We always do. I believe in us. And I believe in you. His words, simple yet profound, brought her some comfort. But there was a lingering fear inside her. What if the world wasn't ready for her, for them? What if she faced even more obstacles as she climbed higher in her career? As if reading her thoughts, Ethan squeezed her hands. I won't let anything tear us apart. Not now, not ever. You're not just my partner. You're my equal. And whatever path you choose, I'll be right here beside you. Amara was overwhelmed with love for him. He had always stood by her, in the quiet moments and in the storm. And now, when it seemed the world was pushing her away, he remained a constant source of light and encouragement. The decision wasn't easy, but Amara ultimately accepted the offer. She and Ethan decided to make the move together, determined to face whatever came their way. The city they were moving to was known for its fast pace, its corporate giants, and its progressive outlook. But Amara knew it also had its share of skepticism, especially when it came to interracial relationships. As they settled into their new life, Amara threw herself into her new role, tackling challenges head-on and proving herself time and time again. She quickly gained respect from her colleagues, though there were whispers behind closed doors. The higher she rose, the more the scrutiny intensified, especially once people began to realize that she wasn't just any black woman in a corporate environment. She was married to a white man, and that, in some circles, was still a story that people couldn't seem to get over. One evening, at a company gala, Amara overheard a conversation between two senior executives. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their words cut through the noise of the event like a blade. "I just don't understand it," one of them said. "Why would someone like him, successful, well-educated, marry someone like her? It doesn't make sense. He could have anyone." The other executive responded, "It's the race thing, right? People can't get past that. But I suppose that's why she's here. She's different. She's a novelty." Amara's heart sank, the words reverberating in her chest. She wasn't naive. She knew how people saw them, how their love story was still a topic of gossip. But hearing it so plainly, hearing how easily they reduced her worth to a novelty, stung more than she had expected. She turned to find Ethan across the room, laughing with a group of colleagues. He caught her eye and smiled, but Amara's smile didn't reach her eyes. She quickly excused herself from the gala, telling him she wasn't feeling well. As she made her way outside, the cool night air hit her face, and she leaned against the building, trying to steady her breath. Her mind raced. Was this going to be her life forever? Was every achievement tainted by the same question? Why her and not someone else? She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to find Ethan standing behind her. He had followed her outside, his expression filled with concern. "Amara, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice gentle. She shook her head, forcing back tears. "I just heard something inside. About us. About me. They think I'm a novelty, Ethan. That's all they see. And I'm so tired of it. I'm tired of having to prove myself over and over again." Ethan pulled her into an embrace, his arms wrapping around her tightly. "You're not a novelty. You're a force. And anyone who can't see that is blind. We don't have to prove anything to anyone. What we have is real. What you have is real. And I will always be proud of you." For a moment, they stood there, the world around them fading into the background. Amara clung to him, feeling his love surround her like a shield. She knew that they would face more struggles, more challenges. But with Ethan by her side, she also knew they could face anything. The road ahead was still long, but Amara was ready to take it on, one step at a time. She had already defied the odds, and now she was ready to keep pushing forward. Because love, real, unbreakable love, was worth fighting for. Success is not about what you accomplish in your life. It's about what you inspire others to do. Amara's career soared to new heights as she settled into her new role at the prestigious company. She was making a name for herself as not just a talented executive, but a trailblazer. It was the type of success that many dreamed of, but few achieved. However, even with the accolades and promotions, something within her had shifted. She knew she wasn't just climbing for her own success anymore. She was climbing to make a difference. There were moments when she still found herself doubting. No matter how much progress she made, there were still those who whispered behind her back, still those who refused to see her for anything more than the color of her skin or the man she married. But over time, Amara learned to shut those voices out. Every time she walked into a room and felt the eyes on her, she squared her shoulders a little more, held her head a little higher. She knew that her worth wasn't defined by anyone's judgment but her own. It wasn't just about her anymore. Ethan and she had built a life together, and their story was far from over. What began as a love story that challenged society's expectations had blossomed into something much more significant. It had become a movement, an unspoken revolution that demonstrated the power of love in the face of prejudice. One afternoon, as Amara was working late, she received an unexpected call from one of her former professors. Professor Mills had always been a mentor to her during her college years, pushing her to think beyond boundaries and helping her develop the resilience that had carried her this far. She had always admired Amara's determination, but now she sounded more impressed than ever. "I heard about your promotion, Amara. But I'm calling because there's something else. I think you're ready to take the next step. Speak publicly about your journey. Your story is important. It could change lives. Amara paused, her heart racing. Public speaking had never been her thing. She was accustomed to working behind the scenes, making decisions that affected change without the limelight. But this felt different. Professor Mills was right. Her journey could inspire so many others who felt they didn't belong, who were afraid to break away from the expectations that society placed on them. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Amara replied, her voice wavering. I've always preferred to stay out of the spotlight. What if people don't want to hear it? What if they judge me even more? Professor Mills chuckled softly. That's the thing about being a trailblazer, Amara. There will always be those who try to keep you in the shadows. But there are also those who need your light to find their own path. You've already proven yourself in the corporate world, but now, it's time to show others how to break free of the limitations that society places on them. After a long pause, Amara finally spoke. Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell my story. It didn't take long for Amara's decision to snowball. The public speaking engagement started small, just a few conferences and panels where she shared her story with like-minded individuals. But soon, the invitations started pouring in. Universities, corporate organizations, even non-profit foundations wanted her to speak about overcoming adversity, about breaking barriers, and about how love could transcend race, disability, and all the other labels society tried to place on people. With each speech, Amara grew stronger. She shared not just her story, but Ethan's too. Their love was at the core of everything, a testament to resilience, to the power of standing together in the face of societal division. Ethan had always been the silent force behind her success, never seeking credit, always supportive. But now, Amara spoke about him with pride, about how he had refused to let their relationship be defined by anything other than love. One evening, after a particularly impactful talk at a large corporate retreat, Amara received a message from an old friend. It was from Tessa, one of the few people who had supported her during those early days with Ethan, when they were still navigating the complexities of their relationship. I saw your speech tonight. I can't tell you how proud I am of you, Amara. You've come so far, and you're changing lives. I hope you know that. Tears welled in Amara's eyes as she read the message. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words, especially now that she was beginning to make a name for herself beyond just being Ethan's wife or a black woman in a corporate space. She was Amara, an individual, a trailblazer, and a voice for others who had been silenced for too long. At home, things were also flourishing. The couple's bond had only deepened as they faced the challenges of a new city and new opportunities. Ethan had never once wavered in his support, even as Amara's career pulled her in new directions. They had learned to navigate their busy schedules and still make time for each other. It wasn't always easy, especially as their family grew. The news that they were expecting their first child was met with overwhelming joy, but also with a new set of challenges. As Amara's pregnancy progressed, she faced increasing pressure to maintain her professional image, even while preparing for motherhood. The constant balancing act weighed on her, but she knew she could rely on Ethan, who was ready to share in the responsibility. One night, as they sat on the couch, Amara resting her head on Ethan's shoulder, they talked about their future, about the legacy they wanted to leave for their child. I want them to know that anything is possible, Amara said softly. That love is the most important thing in the world, and that they should never let anyone tell them they can't achieve something because of who they are. Ethan smiled, his hand resting gently on her belly. We're going to teach them that, every day, and we'll show them how to love fiercely, just like we have. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of their words. She had never imagined that this life, full of challenges and triumphs, would lead her here, but she knew one thing for sure. She was exactly where she was meant to be. As they embraced, she realized that their journey wasn't just about defying the odds. It was about creating something beautiful, something lasting. A family built on love, respect, and the unwavering belief that together they could overcome anything. And with that, Amara knew that their legacy would continue to grow, one generation at a time. Sometimes, the hardest part is not just the journey itself, but finding the courage to take the first step. Amara's days had become a whirlwind of meetings, speeches, and media interviews. The recognition she was receiving for her work, as well as for her advocacy in breaking racial and disability barriers, was growing beyond her expectations. But, as often happened with success, it brought new challenges. The pressure to be everything to everyone was starting to take its toll. It was the night before another speaking engagement, and she found herself staring at the reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face was tired, her hair pulled back into a loose bun, her eyes dark from sleepless nights. She had achieved so much, yet it was still hard to shake the feeling of being torn between her personal life and professional responsibilities. Ethan had been her anchor, his quiet support a constant source of strength. But lately, she felt the distance growing between them. They were both so immersed in their own worlds. His work as a successful architect, her career as a high-powered executive, that sometimes the only time they really connected was late at night, after a long day of being apart. The reality of the situation hit her harder than ever before. They had a growing family now, and the thought of raising a child while navigating these demands filled her with both excitement and fear. What kind of mother would she be if she couldn't balance it all? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Ethan. "I know you're busy, but can you meet me for lunch tomorrow? I miss you." A small smile tugged at Amara's lips. She could feel the love in his words, his quiet way of reaching out when he saw her slipping. But it also reminded her how much she had been putting her family on the back burner, always focusing on the next challenge instead of the present moment. That night, as they lay in bed together, she decided to talk to him. She had to let him know how she was feeling, the strain of juggling so many expectations. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." He turned to her, his brow furrowed in concern. "What do you mean?" "Everything. My career, our family, everything I'm doing to push forward and make a change. Sometimes it feels like I'm drowning in it all, and I can't help but think I'm neglecting the most important thing." Ethan's hand found hers in the dark, his touch warm and steady. "Amara, you are not drowning. I see the way you're changing the world. You're doing something so important. But I also see you, the real you, struggling under the weight of it all. We need to find a way to share that load." Amara felt the weight in her chest loosen slightly, but it wasn't enough. They needed more than just comforting words. They needed action. "Maybe it's time for a change," she said softly. "Maybe I need to step back a little and find a way to prioritize our family. I don't want to lose this, what we have together. I don't want to miss out on these moments with you, with our child." Ethan sat up, propping himself up on his elbow. "Amara, I've always supported you, and I will continue to do so. But if stepping back means being present, means not just being a partner but also a parent, then I'm all in. We'll figure this out together." The next day, they met for lunch at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. As they sipped their coffee and talked about everything and nothing, Amara felt lighter than she had in weeks. They were taking a new path, one that would allow them to prioritize their family without sacrificing the future they were building. "I've been thinking," Amara said, leaning forward. "Maybe I don't need to speak at every event. Maybe it's okay to turn down a few things to focus on what truly matters." Ethan smiled. "I think that's a good idea. You've already inspired so many people. It's okay to take a breather. You've earned it." For the first time in a long while, Amara allowed herself to breathe. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove her worth to the world, to others. But now, she realized, the true measure of her success was in the happiness of the family she was building, the love she shared with Ethan, and the promise they were making to their future. That afternoon, after their lunch, Amara sat in her car, the engine idling. She felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. The journey she had been on wasn't just about breaking barriers in the world of business. It was about breaking barriers within herself, learning to trust in the love she had found with Ethan, in the future they were creating together, and in the simple act of being present. As the days passed, she cut back on the speaking engagements and took more time for herself. She dedicated herself to her family, but also to self-care. She went for walks with Ethan, helped prepare their home for the arrival of their child, and spent more time in quiet moments of reflection. Ethan, too, adjusted his schedule to make more room for the family they were creating. They took vacations, enjoyed lazy afternoons together, and made sure to laugh as much as they could. They had both learned that love was the glue that held everything together, and when you had that, everything else fell into place. Amara was approaching the end of her pregnancy when she found herself facing a decision. She had received another job offer, this one offering a position even higher than the one she had accepted months ago. It was an incredible opportunity, but it came at the cost of more time away from home. Sitting on the edge of the bed one evening, she turned to Ethan. "This is a big one. I've worked so hard to get to this point, but I'm not sure if it's the right choice for us." Ethan placed his hand on hers, his voice gentle but firm. "Amara, you've proven time and time again that you're capable of anything, but I want you to think about what's best for you and for us. If this job will take you away from what matters most, then I think we know what the answer is." She smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "You're right. I've done so much. Maybe it's time to stop proving things to others and start proving something to myself, that I can balance it all, that I can have it all." And just like that, the next chapter of their journey began. One where Amara no longer felt torn between ambition and love. With Ethan by her side, she knew that she had already achieved everything she truly needed. The rest was just a bonus. As they prepared for their growing family and a future that felt limitless, Amara realized that, in the end, it was never about the accolades or the recognition. It was about the love they had built together, a love that had become their greatest success. Every journey has its destination, but the best part is the people you meet along the way. The day Amara had been waiting for had finally arrived. The weight of her pregnancy had become more pronounced, but the excitement and joy that filled the air made everything worthwhile. Ethan had been by her side every step of the way, taking time off work, attending appointments, and doing everything in his power to make sure Amara was comfortable. Their love had grown even stronger during this time, with their bond deepening as they prepared to welcome their child into the world. But it wasn't just the birth of their baby that was a life-altering event. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would require patience, understanding, and sacrifice from both of them. The hospital room was filled with warmth as Amara lay in the bed, her fingers tightly gripping Ethan's hand. He stood beside her, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I'm right here," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Amara squeezed his hand tighter. "I know. I couldn't do this without you." Hours passed in a blur of contractions, deep breaths, and gentle encouragements. The room was filled with medical staff moving in and out, but Amara and Ethan remained locked in their own world, focusing only on each other. It was during those long moments of anticipation that Amara truly understood what love meant: selflessness, unwavering support, and the shared dream of a beautiful future. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the moment arrived. Amara's heart raced as the cries of their newborn filled the room. "It's a girl," the nurse said, placing their baby in Amara's arms. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he looked down at their daughter. Her dark skin a perfect blend of both of them, her tiny hands curling around Amara's finger. "She's perfect," Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Amara smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with an overwhelming sense of love. She had always imagined what motherhood would be like, but nothing had prepared her for the depth of connection she felt in that moment. This little girl was their future, the product of their love, their dreams, and their shared journey. As they sat together, holding their daughter, the world outside the hospital room felt distant. The noise of public opinion, the expectations of society, and the struggles they had faced as a couple all seemed to fade away. In this quiet moment, it was just the three of them, beginning the next stage of their life together. In the weeks that followed, life as new parents wasn't always easy. There were sleepless nights, endless feedings, and moments of doubt as Amara and Ethan navigated this new world together. But every challenge they faced only brought them closer. They had always been a team, but now, with their daughter in their arms, they became an even stronger unit. Amara took time off from work to care for their daughter, her days now filled with the sounds of baby coos, the scent of baby lotion, and the overwhelming love of parenthood. Ethan, too, adjusted his schedule, eager to be present for every moment with their little one. They found themselves relishing in the quiet moments, holding their baby close as they sat together in their living room, talking about their hopes and dreams for her future. But Amara couldn't ignore the pull of her career. The opportunities she had worked so hard for were still waiting for her. The offer for a senior position was still on the table, and she knew that sooner or later, she would have to decide whether to return to the professional world or to focus fully on her family. One evening, as she rocked their daughter to sleep, she found herself lost in thought. What did she want for her future? She had always been driven, always striving for success and recognition. But now, with her daughter in her arms, she wondered if there was a different path, one that didn't require her to sacrifice time with her family for the sake of her career. Ethan walked into the room, his presence a steady reassurance. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her rock their baby with such tenderness. "What are you thinking about?" Amara smiled, her heart swelling with love for both of them. "I'm thinking about what's next for us. For me, I don't want to lose sight of my dreams, but I also don't want to miss these moments. I don't want to look back and regret not being there for her." Ethan crossed the room and knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it all. We can figure this out together. You've built something incredible with your career, but you don't have to choose between success and family. We can find a balance." Amara looked down at their daughter, her tiny hands gripping her finger as she slept peacefully. She knew Ethan was right. She didn't have to do it all alone. They had always supported each other, and this would be no different. "I want to be there for her," Amara said softly. "I want to be present for every step of her life. But I also want to make sure she knows that she can do anything she sets her mind to. I want to show her that it's possible to be both a mother and a successful woman." Ethan smiled, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "And you will. You've already proven that. You've shown the world what it means to overcome, to love without limits. She's going to learn all of that from you." As the months passed, Amara and Ethan settled into their new roles as parents. They found their rhythm, balancing family life with their careers. Amara gradually returned to work, but this time, she did so on her own terms. She scaled back her travel, took on fewer projects, and made sure that her family always came first. Their daughter grew quickly, reaching milestones with every passing day. Amara and Ethan shared those moments. First words, first steps, and first days of school, cherishing each one, knowing that this was the foundation of their family's story. Their love, once tested by the world's expectations and their own doubts, had become their greatest strength. They had weathered every storm, every moment of doubt, and emerged stronger on the other side. Now, they were not just a couple. They were a family, united in love, committed to building a future full of possibilities. As Amara stood in the doorway, watching Ethan play with their daughter in the yard, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had everything she had ever wanted: love, family, and the unwavering support of the man who had always believed in her. Together, they had written their own story. And it was only just beginning. The heart is always the strongest when it beats for those we love. As the years passed, Amara and Ethan's lives flourished in ways they had never imagined. Their daughter, now 6 years old, was an energetic little girl full of life, curiosity, and laughter. The house was often filled with the sounds of her playing, asking questions, and exploring the world around her. Amara and Ethan had become more than just parents. They were partners in everything. The challenges they had faced in the early years of their relationship, society's judgment, racial prejudice, and Amara's self-doubt, seemed so distant now. Those struggles, though difficult, had shaped them into the strong, loving family they had become. And though they had found peace in their love, Amara knew there would always be more work to do, both personally and professionally. Amara's career had taken off in ways she had never anticipated. She had gained the respect of her peers, built a successful network, and had become an advocate for others who faced the same challenges she had. Her success wasn't just about the accolades or the promotions. It was about breaking down barriers for women of color, for those with disabilities, and for anyone who had ever been told they couldn't achieve their dreams. She was an example that it was possible to overcome anything, no matter how impossible it seemed. One afternoon, as she sat in her office, reviewing a proposal for a new community outreach initiative, her phone rang. She smiled when she saw the caller ID, Ethan. It had become a routine for them to check in with each other throughout the day, especially now that they were both balancing demanding careers with their responsibilities as parents. "Hey, you," she said brightly, answering the phone. "Hey, babe." Ethan's voice was full of warmth. "How's your day going?" "It's going well. Just reviewing some plans for a new initiative we're launching next month. It's a lot, but I'm excited about it." "That's amazing. I know you'll make it a success." There was a brief pause before he added, "So, I've been thinking." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Oh no. When you start a sentence like that, I know it's either really good or really bad." Ethan chuckled softly. "No, it's definitely good. It's about the house. I've been looking at some properties, bigger ones, for the future. A place where we can all grow." Amara's heart skipped a beat. They had talked about buying a new house before, but with their busy schedules, it hadn't been something they'd prioritized. But now, hearing Ethan talk about it so seriously, she realized he was looking ahead, looking toward the future. "Bigger? Like what kind of bigger?" she asked, intrigued. "A place with more space for us to stretch out, and a big backyard for their daughter to play in, somewhere we can have family gatherings, entertain, and have room to breathe. It's time we took that next step, don't you think?" Amara smiled. "I think that sounds perfect." After a few more minutes of discussing ideas for their new home, they wrapped up the conversation, and Amara's mind raced. Ethan's proposal wasn't just about buying a new house. It was about their future. It was about their family continuing to grow and evolve together. And it was about a place where they could continue to be their authentic selves without fear of judgment or limitations. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table with their daughter, they discussed their plans further. They talked about the possibilities, new schools for their daughter, new friends to meet, new adventures to have. And while their hearts were full with anticipation, Amara knew there was still work to be done. As they cleared the table after dinner, Ethan looked at Amara, his eyes soft with affection. "You've come so far. I've watched you grow into the woman you always were inside. And every day, I'm in awe of you." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've always believed in me. You've always been there, no matter what." Ethan reached out and took her hand. "We've been through a lot together, and I know we'll face more challenges in the future. But as long as we're together, we can handle anything. I believe in us." The next few months were a whirlwind of house hunting, negotiations, and planning. It was a busy time, but it was also a time of immense joy. They found the perfect house, a spacious, modern home with a large backyard, plenty of room for their growing family, and a peaceful neighborhood. Moving in was a milestone for Amara and Ethan. It was a symbol of everything they had worked for and of all they had overcome. The house, with its fresh paint and empty rooms, was full of potential. It was theirs, a place where they could continue to create memories together, a space that was truly their own. As they unpacked and arranged their new home, Amara looked at Ethan, her heart full. "We did it." Ethan smiled, lifting their daughter into his arms. Together. And for Amara, there was no greater achievement than that, building a life with the man who had never once doubted her, with the man who had loved her when the world hadn't. Together, they had created a family, a future, and a home. As they sat in their new living room, surrounded by boxes and the quiet hum of the evening, Amara couldn't help but feel at peace. Their journey had come full circle, but she knew this was just the beginning of a whole new chapter. The road ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. Whatever came their way, they would face it together as a family, united in love. Love isn't just what you feel. It's what you build, what you protect, and what you pass on. The new house was a dream come true for Amara and Ethan. With every passing day, they transformed it into a home. They painted walls, installed new furniture, and decorated the rooms with care. But more than the material changes, it was the feeling that permeated the space. A sense of warmth, love, and the security that came with knowing they had built something together. Their daughter, already thriving in her new school, had made friends quickly. Amara was proud to see her confidence grow with each new day. She was a bright, curious girl, much like Amara had been at her age. Ethan adored her, and the bond they shared was unbreakable. But even as they enjoyed their new life, Amara never lost sight of the road that had led them here. She had spent so many years struggling with self-doubt, feeling like she didn't belong in certain spaces. But now, standing in their new home, she realized how much she had grown. A few months after settling into their new place, Amara was invited to speak at a national conference for women with disabilities. The invitation was an honor, but it also brought up mixed feelings for her. She had always avoided the spotlight, preferring to focus on her work rather than seeking attention. But Ethan, as always, encouraged her to take the opportunity. "You've earned it, Amara," he told her, his voice full of belief. "You have a voice that can inspire so many. This is your moment." Amara wasn't sure what to expect when she stood at the podium in front of hundreds of people. But when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. She shared her story of falling in love with Ethan despite the challenges, of overcoming the prejudice they had faced, and of her own journey to self-acceptance. She spoke about the importance of not letting anyone define your worth and about the power of love to break down barriers. Her words resonated with the audience, and Amara felt an overwhelming sense of pride. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. She looked into the crowd and saw women, of all races and abilities, standing and clapping for her. It was a moment she would never forget. Later that evening, as Amara and Ethan sat in their living room, enjoying a quiet moment together, she turned to him with a grateful smile. "I never would have done that without you." Ethan reached out and took her hand, his gaze soft. "You've always had it in you, Amara. I just gave you the nudge you needed. But this is all you. Your strength, your courage. You've been inspiring people long before you took that stage." Amara smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I used to think I didn't deserve any of this. But now, I see it all differently. I deserve love, I deserve success, and most of all, I deserve happiness." Ethan kissed her forehead gently. "And you have it all, because you've earned it every step of the way." As the years passed, Amara's life continued to evolve in unexpected ways. She was now a leader in her field, a passionate advocate for disability rights, and a role model for others who had faced similar struggles. She had built a successful career, and the couple's financial stability allowed them to invest in new ventures. Their love story, once something whispered about behind closed doors, had now become a beacon of hope and inspiration for others. Their daughter, now a teenager, had grown into a strong, confident young woman. She was proud of her parents and all they had accomplished. Amara often found herself in awe of the person her daughter was becoming, brave, smart, and full of compassion. In many ways, she was her mother's legacy. One evening, as they sat together as a family in their living room, Amara realized how far they had come. The house, once just a dream, was now full of memories, of love, of laughter, of triumphs and challenges. It was more than just a structure. It was a testament to everything they had built together. As they spoke about their plans for the future, Amara's heart swelled with pride. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every obstacle they had faced. They had created a life that was theirs, filled with love, resilience, and endless possibilities. And as Amara looked at Ethan, her partner, her best friend, the man who had loved her when she couldn't love herself, she knew there was nothing they couldn't overcome. They had weathered storms together, and each challenge had only brought them closer. She took his hand, smiling as their daughter looked at them with pride. "We've done it," she whispered. Ethan squeezed her hand, his eyes full of love. "Together." And with that, Amara knew that their love would continue to grow, that their story would continue to inspire, and that the legacy they created together would be one of unwavering love and unbreakable bonds. For Amara and Ethan, their love was not just a moment in time. It was a lasting legacy, one that would live on in the hearts of their daughter and anyone whose life they touched. And so, their journey continued. Every end is just the start of something new. The world around Amara and Ethan seemed to change at a breathtaking pace. As the years continued to unfold, their love story had become more than just the tale of two individuals overcoming adversity. It was now part of something bigger, an ongoing testament to the transformative power of love, resilience, and the shared vision of a better world for their daughter and others like her. Their daughter, now preparing to leave for college, stood as a bright reminder of all they had fought for. The excitement and pride that filled the air in their home on her graduation day was a moment Amara would never forget. It felt like the culmination of everything they had worked for, not just for themselves, but for the generations that would follow. As they gathered together for a celebratory dinner, their daughter, Maya, raised a glass to her parents. "I don't think I can ever fully express how grateful I am to have parents like you. You showed me that love knows no limits, that obstacles can be overcome, and that strength comes in many forms." Amara's heart swelled with emotion. It was moments like these that made all the struggles worth it. Ethan beamed at their daughter, his eyes sparkling with pride. "You've made us so proud, Maya," Ethan said. "You've always been our shining light. We can't wait to see all the amazing things you'll do." As the evening continued, Amara couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. There had been so many times when she had doubted herself, when the weight of prejudice and societal expectations had threatened to break her. But looking at Maya, seeing the woman she had become, Amara knew that every challenge, every heartache, and every tear had been worth it. Maya, filled with excitement and hope for the future, was ready to embark on her own journey, and Amara couldn't be prouder. But there was also a sense of bittersweetness. This was a new chapter, a new beginning. Her little girl was no longer so little. She was ready to make her mark on the world, just as Amara had once done. As the evening came to a close, Maya left for her new college, and the house that had once been filled with the constant noise of growing children was now quieter. Amara and Ethan shared a quiet moment together, reflecting on the changes that had taken place in their lives. "This is it, isn't it?" Amara said softly, looking around the home they had made together. Ethan smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "It's a new chapter, but it's not the end. It's just the beginning of the next part of our journey, and we'll walk it together, just like we always have." Amara nodded, her heart full. There was a deep sense of peace in knowing that no matter where life took them next, they would face it as a family, with love, support, and an unshakable bond. The world may have once told them that their love was impossible, that it couldn't last. But here they were, stronger than ever, with a daughter who embodied everything they had worked toward. They had built something beautiful, together. As the years went on, Amara's career continued to grow. She became a voice in her community, advocating for those who were often overlooked. Her experiences, her strength, and her unwavering commitment to fighting for what was right made her a respected figure in her field. But despite her success, she never lost sight of what truly mattered, her family. Ethan, too, flourished in his career. His support for Amara, his ability to see the best in her, and his constant belief in their love made him an anchor in both her personal and professional life. Together, they had achieved the impossible, and they had done it side by side. On their anniversary, Ethan took Amara out for a quiet dinner at their favorite restaurant. They sat across from each other, the candles flickering between them, casting soft light on their faces. It had been years since they first met, but the spark between them was just as strong as it had ever been. "I never thought we'd make it this far," Amara admitted, her voice filled with awe. Ethan smiled gently, taking her hand. "I never doubted for a second that we would. From the moment I met you, I knew. We were meant to be." They laughed softly, a moment of shared joy in the quiet corner of the restaurant. The world around them may have changed, but some things, like the love they shared, remained constant. Amara took a deep breath and looked around, her heart overflowing. "We've built something beautiful, haven't we?" Ethan nodded, his gaze full of love. "Yes, and it's just the beginning." In that moment, Amara knew that they were not just the sum of their struggles and triumphs. They were a family, united, unshakable, and bound together by love. And no matter where the world took them next, they would always have each other. The future, for all its uncertainties, was theirs to shape, and they would face it together, as they always had. And so, their love story continued, not just as a chapter in their lives, but as an inspiration to all who believed in the power of love, courage, and the endless possibilities that come with finding the right person to walk through life with. Love, in its purest form, is a force that cannot be denied or diminished. Amara stood before a large crowd at the annual Diversity and Inclusion Gala, a prestigious event celebrating the advancements made in breaking down societal barriers. The award she was about to receive wasn't just a recognition of her professional accomplishments, but a testament to the journey she and Ethan had taken, together, against all odds. The room was filled with influential leaders, activists, and advocates, each striving to make the world a better, more inclusive place. But as Amara took the stage, the applause that resonated through the room wasn't just for her work. It was for the love story that had inspired so many, her and Ethan's unwavering commitment to each other, to their family, and to changing the narrative. Her heart swelled with pride as she looked out at the audience. Her eyes caught Ethan's, who was sitting at a table in the front row. He smiled at her, the same warm, loving smile that had first captivated her years ago. The same smile that had kept her going during the toughest moments of their journey. He had been her rock, her strength, her unwavering support, and she was proud to share this moment with him. Amara's speech was heartfelt. She spoke not just about the work she had done, but about the people who had shaped her, especially Ethan. She spoke of how their love had been tested by the world's prejudices, by the challenges they faced, and yet it had remained unshaken. And how, together, they had built a legacy of love, courage, and resilience that would inspire future generations. When the applause subsided, Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek. It wasn't one of sadness, but of gratitude. She had come so far, farther than she had ever dreamed. And it was all because of the love they had fought for, the love they had refused to let the world extinguish. After the event, Amara and Ethan stood outside, the cool evening air wrapping around them as they held each other close. "Can you believe this?" Amara whispered, her voice full of wonder. Ethan shook his head in disbelief, his eyes reflecting the same amazement. "It still feels surreal, but here we are, together. Our love has carried us this far, and it's going to keep carrying us forward." They both laughed softly, savoring the quiet moment of victory. They had done it. They had turned their love into something that had changed not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. They had shattered stereotypes, broken barriers, and proved that love, in its most pure and beautiful form, could never be confined by society's limitations. Their love had become a symbol of hope for people everywhere. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about every person who had ever been told that they didn't belong, that they weren't enough, that their love couldn't be real. Amara and Ethan had proven that love knows no boundaries, no colors, no limitations. It is limitless. That night, as they walked hand in hand under the stars, Amara reflected on everything they had overcome and everything they had built together. Their daughter, Maya, was thriving, preparing for her own journey into adulthood. She had already started to follow in her parents' footsteps, becoming a voice for justice, equality, and inclusion. Amara couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. Her daughter was carrying the torch forward. But more than that, she felt a profound sense of peace. They had created a life that was their own, a life of love, acceptance, and triumph over adversity. The future, though uncertain, seemed filled with endless possibilities. They had already proven that no matter what the world threw their way, they could handle it. Together, Amara leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder as they strolled down the quiet street. The weight of their accomplishments settled in the air between them like a promise. They had created a legacy, one that would endure long after they were gone. And as they continued to walk through life, side by side, they knew one thing for certain. Their love story wasn't just about them. It was about every person who had ever dared to love in the face of adversity. It was about creating a world where love was free to flourish, where all people, regardless of race, background, or ability, could find their place in the sun. For Amara and Ethan, their journey was far from over. The road ahead was still long, but it was theirs to walk together. And as long as they had each other, they knew they could face anything the world had in store. Their love, their story, and their legacy would continue to inspire for generations to come. And nothing, no prejudice, no obstacle, could ever take that away. The true beauty of love lies not just in the grand moments, but in the quiet ones, where we realize how far we've come together. It was a bright Saturday morning when Amara and Ethan found themselves sitting together on their porch, sipping coffee and enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. The years had passed, and while they had both changed in many ways, one thing remained constant: their bond, stronger than ever. Today was special, not because of any grand event or ceremony, but because it marked the day they were moving into a new chapter of their lives. After years of overcoming challenges, they had decided to leave the city and settle in a quieter town, away from the noise and distractions, where they could focus on their family and the future. The decision hadn't been easy. They had both built careers, cultivated friendships, and created a life in the city that was filled with memories, both joyful and difficult. But with Maya now preparing to leave for college, it felt like the right time for a change. They needed a new space to grow, to continue their journey, and to lay down roots that reflected who they had become. "I can't believe we're doing this," Amara said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "It feels like such a big leap." Ethan, ever the calming presence, smiled and placed a reassuring hand on hers. "We've taken bigger leaps before. Remember when I told you I'd never leave your side? This is just the next step in our journey. Besides, it's not the place that matters. It's the people we're with." Amara chuckled, a soft smile curling at her lips. "True. Sometimes I wonder if we're running away from all that we've worked for." Ethan shook his head. "No, we're not running away. We're creating space for something new. We've already proven that love and success aren't confined to one place or one path. We're doing this because it feels right." Amara nodded, the uncertainty in her heart slowly dissipating. She had always been the one to worry about the unknown, to overthink decisions, but Ethan had always been her anchor. He had stood by her when the world seemed against them, and now he was once again reminding her that they could handle whatever came their way. "You're right," she said, looking out at the horizon. "We've come so far already. This will just be another chapter." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the world around them seemed to pause. The birds chirped in the trees, the wind gently rustled through the leaves, and the sun cast a golden hue over everything. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt at peace. Their daughter Maya was away on a weekend retreat, preparing for the transition into adulthood, and while they were proud of the young woman she was becoming, it also gave them time to reflect. It had been a long journey, and now, as they stood at the edge of this new beginning, they could look back at all they had accomplished. In the years since their wedding, Amara and Ethan had built more than just a life. They had built a movement. They had changed minds, softened hearts, and broken down walls. They had defied the expectations of society, and in doing so, they had proven that love truly conquers all. Ethan had started a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion, while Amara continued her work as an advocate for people with disabilities. Their love had become a driving force for change, and they were both recognized as leaders in their respective fields. They had faced the harshest critics, the deepest doubts, and the most difficult moments, but through it all, they had never wavered. As the days passed and they began packing for the move, they made plans to start fresh. They would set up their new home, create new routines, and nurture the space where their love could grow even deeper. And though it was bittersweet to leave behind the city that had witnessed their journey, Amara knew that this was just the beginning of another beautiful chapter. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to shine above them, Ethan and Amara stood together on the porch, hand in hand, watching the world shift from day to night. "This is just the beginning," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with quiet conviction. Amara squeezed his hand. "Yes, it is. And I can't wait to see where it takes us." In that moment, as they stood side by side, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The love they had built wasn't just about overcoming the odds. It was about embracing the unknown with confidence, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could conquer anything. And so, they turned their gaze toward the horizon, ready for whatever came next. For in their hearts, they knew that no matter where they went, the most important thing was that they had each other. And that, they realized, was more than enough. The strongest love is the one that has weathered the storms, survived the trials, and emerged stronger than ever. Years had passed since Amara and Ethan moved to the quiet town, and life had blossomed in ways they could have never imagined. The transition had been difficult at first, but as time went on, they both found peace in their new life, together, away from the noise of the world that had once felt so suffocating. Maya had flourished, not just in her studies, but in her passion for social justice. Her parents' unwavering support and the example they set had inspired her to follow a similar path, advocating for those who needed a voice and fighting for equality in every sense of the word. When she returned from college, she joined her parents' nonprofit, contributing fresh ideas, energy, and a vision for the future that gave them all new hope. Ethan's organization had grown exponentially over the years. He had become a sought-after speaker on diversity and inclusion, traveling across the country to spread his message of love and acceptance. But no matter how far his travels took him, he always returned to the one place that mattered most: home, with Amara by his side. Amara's career as an advocate for people with disabilities had also expanded. Her work had reached international platforms, and her voice had become a powerful force in shaping policies and changing perceptions. She was often invited to share her story and offer guidance, and her words resonated with people who had felt silenced by society. Yet, despite all her success, she remained grounded, always remembering the trials she and Ethan had faced together and how far they had come. One evening, after another successful gala event, Amara and Ethan sat on their porch, just as they had done years ago. The world outside was still, the soft chirping of crickets and the gentle rustling of trees filling the silence. Maya had just left to visit friends, and they were left alone to reflect on their journey. "You know," Amara said, her voice soft and reflective, "sometimes I still can't believe everything we've been through." Ethan nodded, his eyes distant, as if he was replaying the moments in his mind. The difficult conversations, the painful judgments, and the overwhelming love they had built together. "It feels like a lifetime ago," he said, "but in a way, it all led us here. And that's what makes it worth it." Amara leaned her head on his shoulder, a smile curling on her lips. "I think about how much we've changed, how much we've grown, and how much more we still have to give." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "We've already given so much, but there's always room for more." They sat in quiet contentment, not needing to speak further. They had proven, time and time again, that love wasn't just about passion or fleeting moments. It was about commitment, resilience, and the willingness to fight for what truly mattered. In the years that followed, their family continued to thrive. Maya, now a successful advocate in her own right, often came home to visit, sharing news of her latest projects and ideas. She had even taken over the nonprofit's youth outreach program, mentoring the next generation of changemakers. As they grew older, Amara and Ethan took time to travel, to explore new places, and to enjoy the fruits of the life they had built together. They visited places they had only dreamed of, savoring the beauty of the world while making new memories to add to their collection. And though they both knew their time on this earth was finite, they were content in knowing that the love they had nurtured and the legacy they had created would live on through the lives they had touched. Their love story was not just theirs. It was a story for the world, a reminder that love transcends race, disability, and every obstacle life throws our way. As the years went by, the town they had moved to became a symbol of their journey. People from all walks of life came to visit, drawn by the story of the couple who had defied the odds. And each time someone spoke of their love, of how it had inspired them to be better, to be kinder, to be more accepting, Amara and Ethan would smile, because they knew, deep in their hearts, that their greatest achievement wasn't the battles they had won, but the love that had grown out of it. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow over their home, Amara and Ethan sat hand in hand, knowing that they had built something far more lasting than they could have ever dreamed. Their love story had become a beacon of hope, and it would never fade.